Welcome back to the Early Weigh-In Podcast. This week we break down UFC 281 going down this Saturday in Madison Square Garden in New York City. We got two titles on the line. First up in the main event, we've got champion Israel Adesanya defending his belt against Alex Pereira, the guy who's beaten him twice in kickboxing, now hunting him down here in the UFC, man. I'm really excited for this one. Co-main event, we've got Carla Esparza, second time being the champion, making her first title defense here against Zhang Weili. And can't leave out the featured bout between Dustin Poirier and Michael Chandler, which should be fireworks, man. UFC's done us a real favor here. Incredible card lined up for Saturday. Make sure to like the video, sub to the channel if you guys haven't already. Always free content. Likes and subs always help us out a ton. You did break your little streak. Finally got me in the casual cap this week. Nothing big, but it is all good, man. It's always nice for us both to come out in the green.
Yeah, absolutely. As long as we're both coming out in the green, I know we don't mind trading off the hat. We take a look at your card first. Your two best bets of the night. I'm going to say the first one was Tagir Ulanbekov at minus 180. He made easy work of Nate Maness, and then your parlay between Miranda Maverick and Mario Bautista. Both people dominated their fights. It was the two underdog shots that kind of just didn't hold up. Mark Madsen got his first L, and then Ramona Pascal took the body shots from Vidal. I don't know if anybody saw that one coming. You ended up the night with a small profit of 0.03 units. And then moving on to my card, I only had 4 plays on the night. I tried to fade the Tagir Ulanbekov pick. I took Nathan Maness, and that did not pan out at all. I also thought that it was going to be Marina Rodriguez that was going to be getting the finish in the main event. That also didn't happen. It was the two fight doesn't go the distance that I played that ended up saving my night, with Marina Rodriguez and Amanda Lemos, and the Derek Minner versus Shailin Nurdenbekov. A lot of controversy surrounding that bout. I ended up the night plus 1.71 units, and hopefully we can keep the green streak going. Our main event is for the middleweight title between Israel Adesanya taking on Alex Pereira. Easily the most exciting matchup for Izzy since he's become champion in my eyes. And I know the UFC practically laid out a perfect path to the title for Alex Pereira, but I'm glad they did it, man. It's a story that sells itself, with Pereira having those 2 victories over Izzy in kickboxing. And I haven't been nearly as excited watching Izzy in his last few fights. So I think this is a perfect opportunity for Izzy to kind of step back into the spotlight, and a perfect opportunity for him to try and redeem those losses he suffered in the kickboxing scene. When I look at this fight on terms of where it's going to take place, I'm fairly certain it's going to be taking place on the feet at least 95% of the time. Both guys primary kickboxers, and I think there's a fair amount of ego involved in this matchup, which I kind of interpret as who's going to be the better striker. I gave the kickboxing matches a look, and I noticed, with the striking defense of Alex, a lot of it involved using those 10-ounce boxing gloves to deflect the punches and shell up whenever Izzy was on the attack, as opposed to Izzy, who relied much more on his footwork to evade the power shots being thrown at him by Alex. Then there's the kicking game. This is what I feel like is the biggest threat for Izzy outside of the power of Alex, obviously. I think that's because Izzy relies so much on his footwork to move around the octagon. It's crucial for him to address those leg kicks of Alex that he was actually able to have success with in the kickboxing matches. I think Alex has done a great job as far as the title run to MMA, but in the UFC, but I think he's biting off a little more than he can chew here. Izzy, opportunity to concentrate and adapt his striking style to MMA for the last 5 years, and has for the last 5 years at the UFC level, and has 3 times the amount of MMA matches as a whole. Alex just passed his first full year since his debut in the UFC. I think Adesanya in this fight, he has something to prove with Pereira, and in this fight he's going to have more room to work with inside the octagon than he did against the kickboxing ring. Those straight punches of him are going to eat through the guard of Pereira, as he's still kind of in love with just throwing up his hands for a guard. And I think the speed is going to be apparent. Pereira, obviously a danger to anybody who steps in the octagon with him, with the insane power, but I do think that Izzy's just going to be one step ahead in there on Saturday, and I think he's looking to make a statement as well, which I'll talk about a little bit more in the future.
I love hearing that from you, man. Izzy's been my dude since day one. I've always looked to bet this guy, parlay him something, but this is the first one where I was really kind of like not overly eager to bet him. I've I've watched him clean out the division, but this is someone that can almost match Izzy to an extent in his facet of his game. When you go back and watch the 2 kickboxing matches, the first one is razor close. It's one of the still debated MMA today. It's the volume versus the power and who the judges are going to favor. And, they went with Alex Pereira on that night. And in the second fight, man, it's going Izzy's way. He's touching him up. He's got him doubled over, landing clean right hands. The ref kind of steps in, splits him up. And I think a round or two later is when you see Alex Pereira land, the big left hand. And with 10-ounce gloves, if that lands there, if it lands here, Izzy's going to sleep again. Power is just on another level. I talk about the Thomas Powell fight where he's just like getting announced as the winner off to the side, and 6+ minutes of Thomas Powell laying there unconscious. It's power like you don't see. You look at the picture of him training with Dominick Reyes, who is a 205er, and he is so much bigger than Dominick Reyes. It's unreal that this guy can make the 185-pound limit. But he is a lot more plotting and stationary of a target than Izzy is. And you look at Bruno Silva, who was landing some clean shots on him, also landing some takedowns. Michaelitis stealing all 3, round 1 of all 3 judges' scorecards. And while the takedown threat isn't going to be a factor here, I don't think, it is pretty much me just kind of diving into his inexperience, where Izzy, I talked about cleaning out the division, where this guy's got 3 fights at the UFC level. And outside of Izzy trying to go to 205 pounds, which oftentimes doesn't pan out for anybody, he's been next to perfect, man. He's much faster, better striker. I think he uses his feints a whole lot better. Get Alex biting. And then, I think he knows how to win points better in MMA than Alex is going to. Just uses that jab and footwork like you talked about. He's a real difficult fighter for you to fight, because if you're going to play the range game with Izzy, he knows how to win points, and you're going to play like Cannonier and just Vittori and lose the decision to him. You try to close that distance like Costa, like Robert Whittaker did, and he'll make you pay and actually finish you. So he's a tricky guy to plan for. Minus 150, I probably would have bet Izzy. I don't really necessarily like the minus 190s, minus 200 sitting out there, but I do like violence here. I got plus money. Fight doesn't go the distance here for a unit. The build-up, the revenge you talked about with Izzy. I'm liking some violence here in this one. In our co-main event, we got the strawweight title up for grabs. Carla Esparza taking on Zhang Weili. Esparza, now the 2-time strawweight champion, was the inaugural one. Beat Rose at the end of the Ultimate Fighter, and, funny enough, to get her strapped back the second time, beat Rose Namajunas again. Was very happy to see her get her performance, or to get her title shot. Because listen to this, man. Verna Jandiroba, that win's aging very well. Michelle Watterson, kind of iffy. Marina Rodriguez, aging very well, was just on the verge of a title shot. Jan Jonan, on the verge of a title shot. Alexa Grasso, how good of a win is that looking like right now, She goes out there, man. She sticks to her game plan. And when a big plus number like that is next to her name, you think it would be so easy to back her. Her striking, it's improving. You don't really see her strike with too many girls, but you also don't see her getting absolutely destroyed on the feet like she was against Joanna Jędrzejczyk when she lost her belt either. It's just, if she can't find the takedown, I think she's absolutely screwed against Zhang Weili, man, who's just one of the more devastating strikers of the division, carries real fight-ending power. I know people have seen the videos floating around on Twitter past couple weeks. Dude, she looks in unreal shape. The elbows she is throwing on some of those pads, very scary striker. She looks to be in Thailand for this one, which, it could be the best camp for her, but she did just do a camp at Fight Ready or something with Henry Cejudo, and you would think that with Carlos game plan, that'd be a pretty good camp to go to wrestle a whole bunch coming into this one. Kind of like the one little knock I see there, but stylistically, man, real easy fight. You got one fighter who's going to win all the minutes on the feet, I think, and one fighter who has potential to win all the minutes on the mat. And when you rewatch Rose and Zhang Weili, and you see Rose kind of take over in those championship rounds, landing some of those takedowns and stealing it on the scorecards, it makes Carla a little bit tempting here, because very few times do you get a big plus money on a champion, with a skill set that can just neutralize somebody else's skill set. So Weili's the pick, not the bet. What's your thoughts on the co-main?
I gotta see this one a little bit different. I think we're gonna witness a murder, and ultimately Esparza's retirement fight, man.
I can see it.
I know this sounds like a lazy way of looking at the fight, but I think Esparza wanted that belt for her wedding pictures and to prove to herself she could do it one last time, and now she's fully prepared to hand it over, man. This may be a little bit controversial, but I think that the Carla Esparza you see today as the champion is the same Carla Esparza that choked out Rose in 2014. She's always been very dominant with her wrestling her entire MMA career, and for certain matchups, she's always going to be a tough opponent. That being said, when you start putting girls in front of her that have rounded out games along with exceptional athleticism, and I'm keying in on that, the exceptional athleticism, it's not a great matchup for Carla Esparza. The two fights that stand out to me, you touched on them, it's the JJ fight and the Tatiana Suarez fight. Those are both prime examples of girls in her division that have both legitimate skills in all aspects of MMA, but also the physicality that it takes to stop the wrestling of Esparza. Weili, an absolute specimen, probably the most explosive and athletic girl in the division, and it seems like she's only gaining steam and adding new weapons to her game. Like you said, in prior camps, joining forces with Henry Cejudo to work on the wrestling, and then now at Bang Tao Muay Thai or striking, it looks ferocious. I know everyone saw that video of her lifting Francis Ngannou. I don't care, man. That's impressive to me. I know Weili's takedown percentage isn't the best at 60%, but I'm fairly confident that she's had the chance to refine her takedown defense at this stage in her career, and she's going to be anticipating these takedowns as opposed to the Rose Namajunas ones, which in those later rounds caught me off guard. I know it caught her off guard. So I think that she's going to be able to punish Esparza when she starts to shoot for those takedowns and they become a little bit more telegraphed. That speed, the power, the cardio of Zhang has shown that I think that it'll be just a little bit too much for Esparza. Also, the fact that I believe that she's kind of checked out after having achieved her goal and reclaiming that title. I think Weili goes out there with malicious intent and finishes her. Our third fight on the main card and the people's main event, we see Dustin Poirier taking on Iron Michael Chandler. Win or lose, these guys are known for bringing the heat in every single fight, and I'm doubtful that it's going to be any different this time. I got a lot of questions for Dustin, man. We kind of chatted about it a little bit. I think that he's at the point in his career where you have to start looking at where his motivation is coming from, similar to how people started looking at Conor McGregor's career. At this point, he just got through getting beat by the former champion for the last 6 minutes of his fight. He's had 3 Conor McGregor fights at this point, 2 title shots in his career, and he just watched the guy who dominated him in his last fight get absolutely bullied by the new champion in Islam Makhachev. I struggle to see where that motivation is coming from. From Michael Chandler's point of view, I think I think that he just wants exciting fights. He's been saying that his entire career into the UFC. I think he knows that he might not be on the same level as far as technique and skill as these guys, but his heart is what takes him into these long, drawn-out wars with Gaethje and even the Tony Ferguson fight. That was a solid fight up until he got the knockout. And although that's not holding much weight, I do think that Chandler's going to give Dustin Poirier everything that he wants in this fight. Poirier, from what I've seen on his Instagram posts, he's allowed fighting to kind of take the back seat to the business opportunities he's found outside of the cage. And I think that Michael Chandler, he's still motivated to get that title shot. I personally think that we're in for a banger fight. I'm not really sure how it's going to go. I tend to lean with the more technically sound guy with better cardio in Dustin Poirier, but I do know that Michael Chandler has the tools with the wrestling in his back pocket that he could make this fight an interesting one. As long as it's only 3 rounds, he doesn't have to worry about that cardio dropping off. And if he was smart and didn't care about making an exciting fight, he would use that wrestling here.
It's going to be an insane fight, man. I'm not even 100% sold we see a finish, but I can guarantee fireworks when it lasts. You and I always chatted up about these top lightweights just like flip-flopping opponents, never giving these newcomers an opportunity to jump them.
Strawweight division.
Right, and this fight was just a matter of time to happen. Dustin didn't really want to take it when Chandler first came over here, wanted himself to prove it and everything. But yeah, no running from it now, man. With Chandler, trains out of Henry Hooft, Sanford MMA, best physical shape of some of anybody on the roster, and he's been everything we could have wanted and more coming over here from Bellator. It's just been some of the absolute best fights we've seen, coming off, seriously one of the most disgusting knockouts I've ever seen of Tony Ferguson. He's got the power advantage on the feet, but he does tend to telegraph and load up a whole lot more than Poirier. He does have the wrestling edge, but I don't necessarily ever trust Michael Chandler's gas tank if he's made to grapple a whole lot. To me, Dustin was the clear side. The one knock I have on him, literally the same thing like you talked about. This guy has came up short now. I know he held the interim belt, watched him win it live at 236, but it's not the real one. He's come up short against Habib and Oliveira. And what's your mindset? What's your motivation like? In training now. But to me, man, physicality, bit bigger, longer, younger, 100% the better gas tank here. He's had plenty of hard 5-round experience, and in that technical boxing, he's just light years ahead of Michael Chandler. He's a right-handed southpaw. He carries that power in his lead hand. And everything, you don't see Dustin Poirier loading up on a big wing and shot. Everything's in combination. He'll pop you with a jab 2 or 3 times, come around with the solid hook around your guard. He's got really nice inside and outside calf kicks, and Chandler tends to eat those in that wide stance that he's in. And then the durability of Poirier just seems to be on another level. Chandler's chin seems a bit suspect. You see him dropped by Tony Ferguson, hurt bad by Gaethje, and he's finished by Oliveira and Patricky Pitbull, who's a 145-pounder over in Bellator. So when the fight gets dirty, when it gets rough, man, I do trust Dustin there a bit more. And then you see him eat the fights or eat the shots in the Gaethje fight. So it does make me lean Dustin via decision. But it wouldn't shock me when you see Dustin hurt him, do that little patented jog across the octagon, unleash one of them 10-15 punch combinations on Michael Chandler and put him out of there. I really like Dustin Poirier here. Parlayed him with my fighter to watch. Hopefully he comes out on top.
For my fight of the night, we go to the light heavyweight division where we see Dominick Reyes taking on Ryan Superman Spann. I think this is a perfect bounce back spot for Reyes, coming off of back-to-back losses against current and previous champions of the division. He literally got the short end of the stick since that split decision to Jones, drawing not 1 but 2 absolute killers, trying to get his groove back after suffering his first career loss. Yeah. Now he's finally matched up with a formidable opponent in Ryan Spann, but also one that I think that will allow him to showcase his skills. Reyes, he was able to take a little over a year off since his loss to Prochazka, which I think was a good idea considering the amount of damage he absorbed in that fight. I think if this fight took place before Reyes took those 2 L's, we'd see him coming in closer to a 4-1 favorite here, and mostly because of the sharpness of his striking. You notice in the Chris Weidman knockout, he was able to bait Weidman into following him, and I think he's got a great ability to plant his feet and deliver that piston of a left hand right down the middle that causes problems for anybody in the division. I see a lot of similarities with the striking defense of Spann as I do of Chris Weidman in that bout. Sometimes Spann's attempts are a little telegraphed, and he often hangs out in vulnerable positions if he doesn't get that takedown attempt off his first effort, i.e. that Johnny Walker fight. That being said, we do have to take into account the amount of damage that Reyes has absorbed in his last few fights, and although Spann has issues with his defense, he is highly effective with his offense, especially early in the fight. And considering the long layoff that Reyes has had, along with the doubt that he has to have in the back of his mind, there's a real chance that Spann could capitalize on it. Spann has an excellent straight right hand that can cause issues if you're not careful. And if you look at Spann's record, he has 20 wins with 16 of them coming inside the first 2 rounds. Being as big and long as Spann is, it could definitely make for an interesting fight if Dom doesn't come in sharp and ready to go for this one. I think we're in for an early finish, but I'm not completely sure where it's going to come from, and that's why this is my fight to watch.
I dig it, man. Big boys, very good fight here at light heavyweight. Very much see a knockout coming myself. You talked about a Reyes year layoff, man, and you cannot fault this guy for any of the 3 losses that he's on. But the one thing I do fault him on, I talk about it every time, much like Vettori, holding on to that split decision loss against Israel Adesanya is kind of like the highlight of his career. This guy needs to let it go, man. He needs to move past that John Jones loss, and kind of get over it. I think it would help him out a ton. He's training with Pereira, Glover, and Turman. Glover fights next pay-per-view. Pereira and Turman are both on this. You talked about his striking. You talked about how he can kind of like lure you into chasing him around the octagon, step back. He can carry that power moving backwards, hitting those counter strikes like you talked about. And if he wasn't in the current situation that he's on, I think it would be one of the easiest bets on the card, betting Dominick Reyes here, because Spann has just not been somebody to impress me whatsoever. The only step up in competitions you get are Johnny Walker and Lionheart, and you're finished in round 1. That is not a big step up in the light heavyweight division. That's not somebody like Reyes has been fighting, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
The best wins you're looking at, Luis Enrique, Little Nog, Sam Alvey, man, they're not even in the UFC anymore. So look at who is. Devin Clark, Misha Serkinov, and then your last one, Ion Cutelaba, which was just a very sloppy performance on Cutelaba's behalf. I don't like Ryan Spann that much, man. You know, he has some underrated grappling, has some nice guillotines he can lock up, but on the feet, I expect him to kind of just not be able to find Dom. He'll be scooting around the outside, touching him up with the jab, eventually land that big power shot. We've seen Spann knocked out 4 times in his career. I think he's a bit chinny, and again, there wasn't so many red flags on Dom minus 200 might be a gift. I know we're both talking about violence here. These guys have only seen the scorecards a combined 9 times out of their 41 fights. I think doesn't go the distance or an under is a pretty good play here as well. For my fight of the night, I'm going to go with Ottman Azaitar, taking on Matt Frevola. Another fight here, man, that I do not think is seeing the judges at all. It's a rescheduled bout from Fight Island where Ottman was caught having someone scale the balcony of his hotel room to sneak in the bag, and I'm pretty sure, you know, the UFC actually cut him after that, but having Ali as your manager probably gets you back on the roster pretty easily here. Makes it 2 years since we have seen this guy in the octagon, but looks like he's been getting some good training in at Vegas, the PI, working with some real good guys. This guy's got, like, legit knockout power. He did exactly what he was supposed to do to both Timu Packlin and Kama Worthy, knocking them both out in round 1. The guy's been the distance once. I think he's seen a round 2 like once or twice in his career where 6 of his 8 TKOs were coming in round 1. And you just combine that with Matt's chin and tendency to get in the brawl, and it just... I don't like what I'm seeing from a boy steamroller here. But down the stretch, his wrestling could play a factor, but I almost feel like you say that every time with him, and then he goes out there and gets in the unnecessary wars. He's, you know, finished by Polo Reyes, finished by Terrence McKinney. You see him dropped by Lando Venata twice in that fight. And then even in the last fight where he sets the record for most knockdowns in a round against Gennaro Valdez, dude, there's points where he is getting tagged up in the exchanges as well. And I'm telling you, if Ottman lands one of those, Matt's going down here. He is a dog. I know he'll fight for my dollar. And if he survives this early storm, he could take over with that pace and that wrestling and that cardio and is just as live to get a finish in those later rounds. And as much as my wife and I want to cheer for Frevola here after sitting with him and his brother when he actually beat Jalen Turner, which is a very good win, my gut tells me his head ends up in the nosebleeds at Madison Square Garden in the first round Saturday. So I think I'm going to go Ottman Azaitar.
For my fighter to watch, we go to the middleweight division where we see Andre Petroski coming in as the minus 200 favorite. Petroski has absolutely silenced the haters since entering the UFC off of his loss to Brian Battle on season 29 of The Ultimate Fighter. Not only has he gone 3-0 in the UFC, but he's won all 3 by way of finish. And this last time out against Nick Maximov, he was a fairly big underdog and showed the world he has the strength and wrestling that can be a problem for anyone on a given night. I know he came off the Ultimate Fighter. When he came off the Ultimate Fighter, there was plenty of criticism concerning his cardio because of the performance against Battle, where he was completely gassed after that first round. Then what does he do in his next 2 fights? He gets back-to-back third-round stoppages that answered all the questions about his cardio and heart inside the octagon. The UFC gives him a step up in competition against Maximov, and he passed it with flying colors. Now they're putting him in a spot where he needs to live up to the hype that he's created for himself. And being a favorite against someone with a solid amount of UFC experience like Wellington Turman comes with a lot of pressure. Because he's had somewhat of a rocky road in the UFC so far, I think it's his time to break out as one of the real threats in the division outside of the top 15, and has a chance to put his name on everybody's radar with 4 straight UFC wins, and that's why he's my fighter to watch.
I dig it, man. You know how hype I was for him coming off the show. Great wrestling, and the gym was on a massive winning streak of like 18-0, but since then we've seen Sabatini and Sean Brady both get finished. So he needs to break that gym streak, man. I like it. I'm going to go with Aaron Blanchfield. I told you I parlayed her with Dustin Poirier. I think this is one of the most legitimate young talents on the roster. At 23 years old, I think this girl is going to be around for a very, very long time. Look at the girls on the regional scene that she fought. Kay Hansen, Tracy Cortez, Victoria Leonardo, Brogan Walker, all girls who eventually made it to the UFC themselves. You know, she's still developing on the feet, especially in the boxing department. I think she throws better kicks than she does hands. You saw her hurt J.J. Aldrich with the body kick, but it's the ground game that's a problem for these girls. She's a good wrestler. She's got even better jiu-jitsu, and like one doesn't simply just dominate Miranda Maverick on the mat like that, man. She's very good and has a lot of potential moving forward. But in this matchup, you've got Molly McCann, who's coming off back-to-back elbow TKOs over Luana Carolina and Hannah Goldie, gained that hype with Patty the Pimblett and Barstool. And I think the UFC knows exactly what they're doing here with their young 23-year-old prospect who really doesn't have her name out there yet. No one really knows about Erin, but I think the bookies do. The bookies know exactly what's about to happen here. You just go back and watch Molly McCann's fights with Jillian Roberson. Watch her get taken down, get submitted there. Watch her give up 12 combined takedowns to Talia Santos and Laura Procopio. Takedowns are coming easy and often for Blanchfield if she can get around the hips and get on some of the legs here. I think she's just light years ahead of Molly on the mat. Expecting her to come through with the big victory. Still some of that spotlight that's been on Molly as of late, man.
Yeah, man, I like that you picked her for your fighter to watch. I'm kind of on the same boat, but for different reasons. Her being only 23, I do think that she's going to, find that first UFC loss sooner rather than later. I think that she's an excellent wrestler like you touched on, but she does lack the striking fundamentals that I think is going to take her to the top of the division. As we saw in that J.J. Aldrich fight, that first round was sketchy. She didn't stick to the game plan like I wanted her to, and like she showed that she could have in that second round. And for what it's worth, I think Molly McCann is on a similar level striking as J.J. Aldrich. So if Erin Blanchfield doesn't come in here with the game plan to get this fight to the mat, I think it could be closer than it should be. And at only 23 years old, I hope that she can stick to that game plan and get it done. For my underdog of the week, he's actually not an underdog anymore, so it's a little bit of an iffy pick, but it's Ottman Azaitar. I got him at plus 105, and I think the line's definitely going more towards how I see this fight going. Ottman, quick finisher, which is something that I was looking at to play him inside the distance, but it's still in the plus 100s, and as long as I could have gotten plus money on him, I was going to go with that route. You talked about him, getting kicked out of the UFC and then brought back on. I think that he's in a favorable eye towards the UFC. And Matt Frevola, he's shown in the past that he can get knocked out really quickly. And I think if Polo Reyes can do it, Ottman Azaitar could do it. I just think that he offers a lot of the problems that Frevola's faced in the past. And getting him at plus money, I think it's a relatively easy bet. Him having all these first-round finishes, it's hard to talk more than just about his punching power early, but I do think that that's what's going to get it done here. So him as my underdog is my pick.
He was out there as an underdog for more than a couple weeks, man. Good one to pick. From me, Frankie Edgar. Going to ride with him one last time, man. You can get him as high as plus 188 the last time I checked. He's been contemplating retirement for a while now, but giving him this fight here in his backyard, I'm pretty sure on the main card, big step down in competition. All signs kind of point to this one being the last ride for Frankie Edgar here, who was once king of the lightweight division, then fought his way to a title fight against Max at featherweight, all to just come to 135 where he probably should have been all along. There's very much a chance that this guy is just washed up at this point, and any young contender who is motivated could come out here and have his number. But I'm also willing to bet that 95% of the bantamweight roster who eats a flying knee like that from Sandhagen and a front kick like that from Cheeto is going to be on wobbly legs or knocked the fuck out as well, man. He's got D1 wrestling to fall back on. Look how good he was looking against Cheeto Vera in the first round. First round and even round two. He's got fundamental boxing as well. Knows how to blitz in and out of range. He's got a phenomenal gas tank. Holds the record for most fight time in the octagon. And I truly believe it's been 10 years since he's fought somebody on the level of Chris Gutierrez as far as talent-wise. And then Chris Gutierrez, best strike that he has, finishing, you always bring up his finish with calf kicks. He just dealt with the calf kicker in Pedro Munoz for 5 rounds where he, every time Munoz was throwing the calf kick, he'd blitz in, box him up, get out, and basically would land more shots to where the calf kick, wasn't as influential on the judges' scorecards. And then how about we go look at Chris Gutierrez, who just was neutralized, had his backpack taken. Cody Durden, a flyweight on short notice, just out-wrestled this guy. I think this could be a very, very generous number. If plus 200 gets out there, I will 100% be tracking that. But plus 140, decision only for Frankie Edgar, I think is a phenomenal bet. That's how I see him winning this one, as he's known to go to the decisions pretty much. But when he's been losing lately, he's been losing by finish. So I'll be getting that stake back. Frankie Edgar, dog of the week, man.
For my prop to watch, I touched on it a little bit in our opening breakdown. It's Israel Adesanya by TKO. I got it at plus 470. I think that is so far off, man. One, I think we both see this fight not going to the judges. I think that this is going to be a stand-up war, and if it's anything like their kickboxing match with these 4-ounce gloves, I don't think it's going to decision. Israel Adesanya, he has the cleaner striking, the straighter punches, and I think that he actually has the timing of Pereira. It's just anybody's liable to get caught with Pereira's power. All that being said, I do think that Izzy is going to finish him this time. There's no standing 10 count for Pereira to hide behind this time, and I think that Izzy's KO line, anything plus 300 or better, is a good bet, honestly.
I agree with you, man. Prop for myself, we've touched on the fight a little bit. Azaitar, Frevola, under 2.5. I saw minus 171 out there. We don't have to really go too depth in here. I just really like the finishing upside for both of these guys. Let's say Frevola survives the early storm. He's got the cardio and he's got the wrestling advantage to be able to take over and really break Ottman down the stretch. I do not see Ottman's gas tank being able to keep up with Matt coming off this layoff here. But what does our gut feeling really tell us happens is Ottman goes out here and gets the TKO probably in round 1. Matt tends to be pretty irresponsible defensively, gets into slugfest when he doesn't need to. And the chin's just has been brought into question too many times, and I think that power of Ottman is maybe even more powerful than the two we've seen him knock out already before. So regardless of the winner, I see this hitting under 2.5 rounds, which minus 171 on Bet Online. It's a 63% chance, man. I think that's minus 230. I think it's 70-75% chance that we're looking at this fight seeing a finish. So Azaitar Frevola under 2.5 for my prop of the week.
For my best bet, I'm taking Dan Hooker taking on Claudio Puelles. Fight doesn't go the distance, sitting at minus 140 right now. I think that the far more likely thing to happen is Hooker's going to step in there. He's going to put the pressure on Puelles, and he's going to absolutely melt him. Mm-hmm. That being said, he is 1-4 in his last 5, and he's gotten finished in 3 of those 4. Puelles is on this win streak. He's 26 years old. And just from a marketing perspective, Hooker's a good name to build your 26-year-old prospect on top of. Puelles, I think that he's a sub or bust type of guy in this situation. If he doesn't get just completely melted by Hooker, I think that it's very possible that he could wrap up a submission. You don't get 3 knee bars in the UFC and not be a huge threat to anybody on the ground. Sitting at only minus 140, I think Hooker's going to push the pace, and Puelles is going to have to do something about that, whether it's just going all out for a submission or melting under that pressure. So minus 140 fight doesn't go to decision is my best bet.
I'm going to lean toward melting under the pressure, man. My best bet is going to be Dan Hooker, who's now at minus 151. I think he's going to go out there and just mollywop this kid. I know he's been on a rough stretch lately, not being the Dan Hooker that was fighting Felder and Poirier, but I think the City Kickboxing crew in general are really set up to get back on track and get some winnable fights here. And I don't, you look through the lightweight list that you've seen Dan Hooker fight, man, and there's no one like Claudio Puelles on that. We're talking about maybe Ross Pearson before we're getting that low level again, and he finishes him with a knee up the middle, which could be another factor here if Puelles is out there shooting some takedowns. He's back to 55 where he does belong. He did not need to be making 145. Don't know what sent him running down there. But still, Arnold Allen is not a loss to be ashamed about, whatsoever. He's much better than Claudio Puelles. And then you get run through by Islam on the mat on short notice, a guy who is arguably the pound-for-pound best fighter on the roster right now, man. I don't put any shame in a lot of Dan Hooker's losses recently. The competition difference is just insane. While Puelles is coming off of wins over Grutzmacher and Guida, losing rounds to Grutzmacher, those are both old, slow guys who are willing to mix in that grappling. And if Dan's smart, he's not following this guy to the mat whatsoever. He's twice a striker, man. I think he's really going to put it on him. I think he's in a good spot to get back on track. My tracked line is minus 176, which kind of sucks because I thought I was going to be on the right side of the line movement. But I've got in at minus 152 again. I might look to double down, might look at that, under to kind of slight hedge. But my gut feeling is Dan Hooker finishes this guy who's just not ready for that top level 15 guys yet.
Now moving on to our quick pick section. We start off the night in the light heavyweight division where we see my girlfriend's favorite fighter, Carlos Olberg, taking on Nikolai Negromarianu. I'm gonna be going with Carlos Olberg. I do think that he's gonna get the job done and kind of, show the fraudulence of Negromarianu here.
Yeah, I'm with you. I did lay 1.2 units on Olberg at minus 120 to win a unit for a bet. I'm actually surprised that we didn't add a section called Vanessa's favorite fighter to watch here. Moving on up, Julio Arce taking on Montel Jackson. Montel is somebody for me who has all the tools to be a really, really good fighter, but just almost doesn't look like he takes it serious to an extent. I do have to lean toward him. I don't really like the price tag, but I'm going to side with Montel.
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's like Montel's never beaten anybody better than Julio Arce, and Arce's never lost to anybody worse than Montel Jackson. It's a tough one to call. I'm going to go with you and lean towards how the odds are looking and go with Montel Jackson, but I think that's going to be a really good fight. Moving on to the featherweight division, Mike Trizano versus Seungwoo Choi. I'm leaning towards Sting, and I think he might get it done with ease.
Yeah, I know your thoughts on Trizano, and you know my thoughts on Choi, who I've backed quite a bit as well. So I've been looking at Choi's money line as well. Been looking at it all week, man. I think he's going to be my easy pick as well. KK, Carolina Kalakavlitz, taking on Silvana Gomez-Juarez. As much as we'd like to see KK win, I think she's getting knocked out, bro.
Yeah, I've got Big Tits McGee here. I think Gomez-Juarez will have her number, and her striking will come through. Moving on, we go to the lightweight division. Ottman Azaitar taking on Matt Frevola. I've already put in my bet for Ottman Azaitar. I think that he's going to start Frevola early.
Hurts to say it, but I'm with you, man. I got Ottman Azaitar by first round TKO. Petrosky versus Wellington Turman. Turman, he can be slick on the mat, man. He just pulled off that armbar over Misha Serkinov, but I think Petrosky's just got a really well-rounded game, man, and I'm going to go with Petrosky.
It's a weird one, Petrosky being in a favorite position. But
being plus 400 or whatever.
Yeah, after being a huge underdog. And Wellington Turman in the training room with bigger guys like Glover Teixeira and defending those type of submissions. If Petrosky can't get it to the ground and keep him there, I think that it could be a squirrely fight. I know he was my fighter to watch, but I think I'm going to pick against him and go with Wellington Turman here. I think that he kind of drops the ball here, and Wellington Turman might be the guy to extend the fight longer than Petrosky would like. Moving on to the flyweight division, Aaron Blanchfield versus Molly McCann. I'd love to see Meatball Molly get another win, but I do not think that's going to happen.
I don't want to see Molly McCann get another win. I'm tired of all the shenanigans. I think Blanchfield just completely neutralizes this girl for 3 rounds. She could find the sub, but Blanchfield with probably like a 30-26 decision here. Gonna go Dominick Reyes taking on Ryan Spann at 205 pounds. I think Dominick Reyes knocks him out in the first or second round, man. Dom Reyes, good pick for me.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think violence is the real answer, but Dominick Reyes will also be my pick. Moving on, Renato Moicano versus Brad Riddell in the lightweight division. I think that Brad Riddell has cleaner striking of the two. If Renato doesn't get this fight to the ground, I think that he eats a lot of shots when they're on the feet, and so I'm actually going to go with the dog and Brad Riddell here.
Yeah, the co-main or the prelim main event didn't really touch on this fight at all, but I see value on Brad Riddell, especially sitting at plus 100, plus 105. Very, very talented striker, and I think he has the power who could take advantage of that beating that we see Moicano just take, Moving on to the main card, starting the pay-per-view, we got Dan Hooker taking on Claudio Puelles. Dan Hooker inside the distance, my best bet of the week.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Dan Hooker should get it done. Moving on to the bantamweight division, we see Frankie Edgar taking on Chris Gutierrez. I'm going to go with Chris Gutierrez here. I think there's some valuable ways to play Frankie Edgar, but I think Gutierrez is the more likely to get the win here.
I'm going to side with Frankie Edgar, man. I see tons of paths to victory for him, competition strength. I know retirement is not usually the fight game doesn't really end well for guys who are seeking retirement, but Frankie Edgar is going to be the pick for me. Poirier versus Michael Chandler in our featured bout of the evening. Yeah, Dustin Poirier, man. I like him to get the job done.
Yeah, I think it'll be an awesome fight. I'm also going to side with Poirier here, just a little bit cleaner all around. Moving on to the co-main event, the strawweight title fight between Carla Esparza and Weili Zhang. I think Weili comes out here and absolutely dominates on Saturday.
Yeah, I'm going against and underestimating Carla yet again. Zhang Weili inside the distance, probably going to get her belt back. Adesanya versus Alex Pereira. My boy he's going to keep his belt. I love it.
Yeah, I think people are overthinking it. This is Israel Adesanya all day.
Good stuff, man. Total of 14 fights on Saturday. I think they've got the press conference actually tomorrow on Wednesday instead of Thursday. Weigh-ins on Friday. Killer fight at MSG, man. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you next week.
Peace.